We all belong outside. We're drawn to nature, whether it's the recorded sounds of the ocean we doze off to, or the succulents that adorn our homes. Nature makes all of our lives, well, better. Despite all this, we often go about our busy lives removed from it. But the outdoors is closer than we realize. With AllTrails, you can discover trails nearby and explore confidently. With offline maps and on-trail navigation, download the free app today and make the most of your summer with AllTrails.
Did you receive the ball, sir?
Oh, sorry, no, hold on. What are we doing? Sorry, I don't know what that is.
I love the randomness of my podcast. I give all of my guests a ball, an imaginary ball, which I give them a short pass. And a recent podcast, Johnny Joel said, I got it, Paul, and I done with the ball what you think I should do with it, and I made the space, etc. Leo Moynihan, welcome to Book Corner Extra Time, sir. And
Thanks for having me.
That pass that you got, where did you put it?
I'm an old centre half, so I just got rid.
Right, okay. We're going to be talking about Thou Shalt Not Pass, so I'm guessing that's why you wrote that book. I want to talk about the Three Kings, because you wrote a fantastic book on the back of Johnny Owen's wonderful documentary, so I want to know about the dynamics of that. Also, you've done a documentary recently. I want to talk about that, but I want you to introduce yourself and talk about your back catalogue and how you got into journalism. I believe it was through your dad. He was an absolute legend, wasn't he, with a pen?
Yeah, well, my dad sort of had a say in it in terms of I grew up with the sound of his fingers on a typewriter, which probably inspired me without realising. I grew to love football through Dad, and he was John Moynihan, who covered football in the 60s, 70s, 80s for the Sunday Telegraph, football correspondent there. So I guess people get taken to the match with their dads, don't they? That's the sort of the way it happens for so many of us. And Dad was working every Saturday, but I was lucky enough in the good old days when people were a bit more relaxed at football. He used to take me to the odd match, and I'd sit on his lap whilst he filed his copy, and I loved it. I loved the sort of buzz of a press box from then. Had slight dreams of playing the game, and it didn't quite work out for me. And so, I wasn't that academic actually, but it sounds quite funny from someone who's made a career out of writing books. But I did like writing. I liked sort of history and writing, and I just thought that's the thing to get into. And after university, I just started sending off articles and got a job at first sort of making the tea at 442 magazine, who I still write for now and then, and very quickly realized I wanted to be my own boss. And I just started going freelance, and that's what I've been doing for the last 20 odd years. So, writing for a lot of different magazines, papers, online, and then got into books, which I really love. I think books have become my thing, and that's the sort of, I like the space you have, the space you get writing books. If there's some sort of football analogy there, probably. But if I was a footballer, I'd like to I'd probably be Jan Molby.
And Jan made space for himself.
There you go.
Didn't do an awful lot of running, but great footballers and world-class players always find that space. And people say, well, how do they do that? They do it because they're very, very talented. I always used to think it was a simple game until I've recently interviewed John Giles, and John said, no, it's a difficult game, Paul. You're always learning. I was always learning throughout my career, and I'm still learning now. And I think that sometimes we do think that it's a simple game, complicated by idiots, but it is a difficult game, because if it was that simple, everybody would be playing it. Everybody would be bloody good at it as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's far from simple. I think you can overthink it and tactically tie yourself in knots. I think some coaches do that, but I think it's you're playing against great players. Of course, it's not simple. No, you've got to. The best do find a way of making it look simple, but it isn't.
Absolutely. When was your first book, Leo? What was the first title that you wrote, and how did you get into it?
My first book was in, let me just think back to 2004. I did a biography of Gordon Strachan. Now, I had no affiliation to I'm not Scottish. I don't support any of the teams that Gordon played for, but I was asked by a publishing company. Gordon had made himself a little bit of a cult figure at the time. He was managing Southampton, and his I don't know if you remember his match of the day interviews and like post-match interviews had become quite sort of the internet was fairly young back then and we didn't have social media, but people were kind of noting it, and he'd be quite funny, and the things like journalists saying, "Can I have a quick word?" and he said velocity, things like that, and made him quite the figure. So I was approached to write a book about him, and it was something I wanted to do, and actually the more I looked into it, the more I really became fascinated with this character. And it wasn't an authorized thing, but I did get hold of Gordon and just say, look, this is what I'll be doing, because I was going to approach a lot of people that he worked with, and word was going to get back to him. So it all went very well. In fact, I started ghosting a column for Gordon in full for 2 years later, and like him very much. So I really enjoyed that book. It was funny, insightful. I mean, the story was, I'm not saying my book was, you'll have to read it to make your decisions, but no, it was really, really enjoyable, and it got me really into the world of publishing.
What an absolute character, and what a great person to write your first book about, because you're right, they used to ask him, and Strachan, Gordon would always be, or could be, very thorny if you didn't ask him a decent question. I mean, he would say, wouldn't he, "You've been all week thinking about a question and you ask me that, right, I'm off." And I love people like that. As a manager, he was great. As a football player, he was great. I remember doing an interview with Big Ron, and he was telling me when Ron signed him for Coventry. Yeah. And it signed him as I think an assistant manager, if memory serves me right. And they had a five-a-side
player coach.
Absolutely. Well, he literally did become that, because Ron said, I'd signed him. I'm sure he was an assistant. Got him first day training, and he looked at him and he thought, you know what? He's our best player.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, he did turn into player coach.
I was lucky enough to get my own Strachanism, if you like, because having written the book, I felt I must send Gordon a copy, which I did, and then I met up with him a few weeks later, maybe a couple of months later, and I said, "Did you like the book, Gordon?" And he sort of sheepishly said, "Leslie liked it." Leslie being his wife, Leslie really liked it, and I thought, that's good. His wife liked it. But I wanted to follow up on it. I said, "Well, Leslie liked it. What about you?" And I was a bit worried, thinking, oh, maybe he doesn't like it. He said, "Well, I'll be honest with you, Leo. I started reading the book, and then quite shortly into it, I realised I knew the ending." So I was very proud to get my own little whiplash from his tongue. Yeah, but a great guy, great footballer guy. What a footballer, by the way. Often, it's funny trying to tell young people just how good these people from different generations are, but because they only see them in managers' tracksuits. But he was just fabulous, wasn't he? And what he did at Aberdeen and Leeds, I think especially, was just some of the best football we've seen. So There he is, the wee man. Great personality.
Absolutely a fantastic footballer, and a character as well. And I think the game, we haven't got the characters like we used to. And I guess Strack's mob were probably the last of the characters. Your documentary, let's dwell on the now at the moment before we go back. Your documentary that you've recently cut with Paddy Barclay. Tell us about that.
Well, Paddy and I I don't know what our job titles will be on this one, but we were sort of football consultants, I guess. Yeah. Patrick is a dear friend. He was a friend of my dad's, obviously, but then has become a great friend of mine. And Paddy was approached by a Thai filmmaker who was absolutely obsessed with British football. Knows a hell of a lot about British football. You could bring up a player from the 80s and he'd sort of give you his resume. And he wanted to make a series really for Thai TV, I guess the equivalent of sort of Thai Netflix sort of thing, a documentary series looking at all the aspects of football in all different parts of the country. And Paddy and I were sort of asked to come on board and help set up interviews, do the interviews to camera. And so we went off on a little adventure around the country, interviewing a load of people, including your friend Terry Cohen, who was wonderful. And we hope it's gone well. We haven't seen any of the, I think it's rushes they say in the business, or any of the any footage. But we know he's a very good filmmaker, and if the show is anything like his passion, then it should be a good watch. I don't know whether it will ever be seen in Britain, but we'll keep you posted.
So we literally could have some of the stars of the past. Did you do any stars of the now being stars in Thailand? Because Thailand is a massive football-loving country. In fact, Peter With managed the national team, didn't he, out there in Thailand?
He did, yeah. Peter With, I think Peter Reid had a go as well, actually.
Yeah.
So the sort of the essence of the guy's story was football of the past.
Yeah.
It was in English. I think that the title translates to When the Pitch Was Young. That confused a few people, but I think it was about how it was and what made it so great. So we were focusing on a lot of people from the past. We talked to make it very contemporary. We talked to we talked to a lot of fan groups, just fans outside grounds, but we approached people like the guys at the Anfield Rap who have become, they started off just doing podcasts
they're very
about
good.
And how that side of supporting a team has developed, and the way people get their football content these days being so much more than it used to be, and things like the Anfield Rap sort of dominating that scene. So it has a contemporary feel, but in terms of superstars, I mean, we talked to Gary Lineker, we talked to people about what they're doing now and Match of the Day and stuff like that. We went over and talked to Alan Shearer and Gary Lineker, which was great, at the Match of the Day studios one Saturday while they were working. So that gives it a sort of now feel, but it's definitely looking back at golden times of the past.
I love the analogy about football, Match of the Day and working. I mean, what a gig that is, isn't it?
Well, they let us into their, I suppose, what you call a green room, and they've just got a wall of screens.
Yeah.
And the three of them are sitting feet up on the sofa watching football. But I mean, that's where I guess they would argue that. I mean, they are working, but it all comes together on the Saturday night, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I wish that they would do a little bit of historic content on Match of the Day these days, because back in our day, and when you were talking to the fellas about when the pitch was young, the games were all kicking off on a Saturday at 3:00, and of course now Match of the Day, it has Match of the Day 2 on a Sunday night, because half of the games, especially this week with Europe, will be played on the Sunday. So
exactly,
Saturdays there ain't many games.
But Paul, it was Match of the Day, wasn't it? They chose one. I mean, they chose one not because it was the best one, but they chose one to take all their cameras to. So it was that must have always been an interesting decision. Who are we going to do this weekend?
Again, another bugbear of mine. It was Match of the Day, and it could have been, for instance, Fulham versus Bournemouth last week, because that was a match of the day in the Championship. It didn't necessarily have to be in the first division.
You're right, actually, yeah. They show games, whatever was the big game that weekend.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Terry Curran, you referenced Terry, when he scored that goal, that wonder goal, Easter against the Blades, although Wednesday fans call them the Blunts, and then they also call them some other derogatory
Was that the Boxing Day Massacre one?
No, the Boxing Day Massacre one was the one where they had 48,000 going on to about 76,000, where literally they absolutely massacred them. Those were games that was played, I believe, 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to be doing a game of my life with TC, so we're going to absolutely really nailed down the
Got to be that
Boxing,
one, hasn't it?
Boxing
Yeah.
Day Massacre. I do quite a
Yeah.
few of them, but
Yeah.
the one that they played after, I believe it was around Easter time when Terry Curran scored that wonderful goal at Bramall Lane. But again, on Match of the Day cameras, I remember Cloughy when Brighton played Bristol Rovers, and I think Warboys scored 4 goals. I remember that from my young days. I remember being at St Andrews, and we used to be singing, "Can you hear us on the box? Can?"
Yeah, I
And
remember that
and
chant.
it was one of them things that you'd look up. The TV cameras are there. We're on Match of the Day.
Yes. I remember being at Upton Park once and getting home and watching it that night and seeing myself on the telly. It was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me.
But again, it was exciting because it
Yeah.
didn't happen that often.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously
I
with
wasn't doing the
Liverpool.
old. I wasn't doing the old waving. Do you remember when the ball would fall somewhere and half the crowd would do that wave, hoping
Yeah,
to get on? Yeah, it doesn't
yeah,
happen anymore because there's cameras
yeah.
everywhere.
And you do
Yeah.
something like that, and you'd probably be on Scylla on the night as well. Look at these muppets on. Television has just come out, and we're all waving to me mum. Hello, mum.
Hi, mum.
That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
the staple, wasn't it? So, your most recent book is Thou Shalt Not Pass, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
How
Yes.
long did that take you to formulate? And the concept of, you've alluded to it earlier, you were a budding centre half, so that's the area of the pitch you would always look at players. And was it just British or was it European and world? But we have had some fantastic British ones.
Yeah, the majority of it is. It's about the position. So whilst the references are all very British, there is one chapter on the South Americans and one chapter on the great Europeans. So to reference them, but really the whole book is kind of about the position as a whole. In terms of how long, I'd have thought I'd been thinking about doing the book for absolutely years. As I say, standing in the rain on Hackney Marshes on a Sunday morning, it probably gave me something to think about, and the position at an amateur level always made me laugh more than anything because it was always the big brute at the back, wasn't it? The sort of
John Smith's advert.
Yeah, and that's actually how the position I always felt was still sort of considered. The big brute who launches it into Rosette. Even especially in this country, which is funny when you think maybe I mean, we could sit here and argue it, but the most talented British footballer that ever lived was a centre half. So, and a very silky, knowledgeable footballer he was. Bobby Moore,
I was going to say, are we talking Bobby Moore or Neil Franklin?
Neil Franklin, good player, apparently.
Yeah.
So I read.
Yeah.
So that the whole thing fascinated me about how it's the one position that has changed and become so vital recently. And if I talk to foreign guys about it, different cultures saw it differently. I was lucky enough to get a lot of time with Virgil van Dijk and, being Dutch, how those two things married, total football and the position. So the whole thing, I felt there was certainly a book, and I certainly had enough passion for the position to try and make it work, and hopefully it did.
With 24 in total football with Rounis Michaels, he was actually without a couple of centre halves, wasn't he? And he stuck Harry on at the back, and he played midfield players at the back. It was more of an accident than a design, and it absolutely worked. And that was the prototype, if you like, for the game of football.
It was just at the time when Liverpool did just that. They'd been beaten in the European Cup. Quite heavily by a Red Star Belgrade, I believe it was, and with Shankly leaving, and Paisley and Shankly had talked about it, and when Shankly left, that Liverpool decided, I think Shankly was going to do it anyway, but Paisley really wanted to try midfielders at centre back because they were going to get the ball more and more and sort of be very patient, especially if they wanted to win the European Cup that had become quite elusive to Anfield, even though they go on to win it so often. But they moved, Emlyn Hughes was a great fullback and midfielder, really, but they moved him in there. And Phil Thompson, I mean, to look at him, we think of nothing else but centre half, but he was quite a gangly holding midfielder, but great on the ball, very good on the ball, and wanted to get on the ball. And that really started in terms of British football and really changing the position. And as I say, being far more patient and continental, as we now call it.
He was one of two players, captains of an English football European winning team that went to the same school. Dennis told you that, I'm guessing.
Dennis Mortimer, Dennis Mortimer.
Yeah.
I think I did know that. So we brought it up with Dennis Mortimer. But isn't that amazing? We'll have to get it confirmed. But is there another school in Europe that's produced, or in the world that's produced two European Cup winning captains?
I would think it's probably not happened before. We never know because we don't know Europe.
There could be some school in Milan or something, or Madrid. But if someone could try and find out and let us know, that'd be great.
Madrid would probably be my first port of call to have a look. But who knows? But again, two Scouse lads. And Kenny Swain, of course.
Kenny Swain was in there in Kirby Boys, wasn't he?
Absolutely,
Kirby Boys, so,
he did. Yeah.
And McDermott played for Kirby Boys. So
we couldn't
European Cup winners.
We couldn't work out whether Terry McDermott was a better footballer or drinker. But I think we sorted out that he was great at both.
Can we just say he's absolutely brilliant at both?
Absolutely.
Absolutely brilliant at both.
And I've heard that from so many sources. Terry Mack, what a player. What a drinker as well.
Yeah, if they were taking on the United Drinking Club, I think the two men standing were McDermott and Brian Robson.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. But again, it was the culture back in those days. The Johnny Come Latelys and the newbies, etc., etc. Well, football players can't do that. Football players wouldn't be able to produce magic if they did that. Trust me, they did, because that was part of the culture back then, and it was an era that we conquered and mastered Europe.
Yeah, I think it was a matter of pride as well. If you were late into training the next day, you were seen as some sort of wimp.
Yeah.
And actually, and I think as far as Liverpool goes, I think that people like Ronnie Moran and Joe Fagan welcomed it. Yeah. They would quietly welcome it and say, right, go out, lads. But the key to it was what they drank. And Ronnie Moran, for one, knew he could if someone's had a night on the lager, which is mainly sort of water lager, he can sweat it out of them. They'll get them, they had a thing called the sweat box where you kick the ball against the wall, and it was this very hard graft for like 3 or 4 minutes. You were basically just kicking the ball and sprinting. And he knew he could get rid of it. Now, when he found out that the likes of Graham Souness had come in and enjoyed a glass of champagne or a vodka, that's when he cracked down on it, because that's going straight to your liver and slowing you down, apparently. So there was methods to the madness.
I'm not too sure that what they would have done with Uddy, because his favourite drink is vodka and orange.
Vodka and orange, yeah.
And copious amounts.
With him in the past.
Yeah, but I would say to me, Paul, because of my lifestyle, I had to work harder in training, and I think the guys knew that. So the more that they would go out and party hard, the more that they would work hard in training and produce it on the football pitch. And I think that's the myth of today, where they look about the drinking culture and say, oh, they wasn't as professional as the players today. Now, do me a favour, they were uber professionals.
They probably had to be more. Yeah,
well, absolutely,
a bit more professional. Yeah,
and it just was the way that football was in those days. The Three Kings, talk to me about that, because it was a great documentary. What come first, the documentary or the book? And how did you write? Did you write the book from watching the documentary? That would be okay.
No. So I was introduced to Johnny Owen, who's the marvellous filmmaker behind the Three Kings film.
Yeah.
He'd done I Believe in Miracles, which is a wonderful movie about Notts Forest and Brian Clough. So just a mutual friend of ours introduced me to him, and we had a coffee or two in Soho one day, and we were just chatting and getting on, and he was talking about what he wanted to do next, Johnny, and he was a very proud South Wellian, I think, is that what Welsh people say?
Yeah, Wellian,
yeah, there you go. For Merthyr Tydfil, which is actually for South Wales quite a football mad place, considering most people love their rugby down there. But Johnny's father had been a miner and a crazy football fanatic.
Yep.
And Johnny, and he'd recently died, his dad, And Johnny had always noted that when people came on the telly on Match of the Day or whatever it was, his dad would always say he went down the pits. He went down the pits, very proud of it. So, there's a lot of people whose family and links to, from Bob Paisley, to Bobby Robson, lots of people that had a history of mining, whether it was themselves or they came from mining families. And it just struck a chord with Johnny, and he said to me that he was really thinking of doing a movie, and the three main ones to think about in that capacity were Jock Stein, Matt Busby, and Bill Shankly, because all three worked down the pits. They were all worked underground and went on to build these football clubs. So the story was there. I mean, I don't know if you remember, Hugh McIlvanney did a little BBC series on the same subject years ago in the early 90s, I think. But Johnny wanted to make it, a one-off documentary and give it a modern twist and keep the story out there. Because, if we think about social media and things like that these days, these three clubs are the biggest, among the biggest in the world, and they all three of them came from these three men. So I was excited about his project, just thinking, he's going to make this great thing. And then that night he just phoned me and said, you know what, there should be a book with this documentary. Yeah. Why don't you do it? So we spoke to some people, we got some publishers, got some meetings, and got a taker. So they were going to come out together. I have to cast my mind back because but the book was going to come out on the release of the documentary. Now, the film business being the film business, it stalled. So I'd finished my book, but Johnny couldn't quite get it out at first. There was talk of it being on Netflix, but Johnny wanted it to be in cinemas.
Yeah.
Which it eventually was. Briefly, it was during lockdown. It came out in cinemas, and then obviously went on to Amazon. But the book had come out a year before, but we actually, his film poster was different to my book cover. So, and I tried to write it. I mean, my voice is in the documentary, so I kind of had a little peek into what Johnny's angle was, but I wanted to do the same story in my way, and actually in the end the two things really complement each other, and we actually pretty much looked at it in the same way. As I say, more space with books, so maybe I have more on the mining and everything, but I think the two work really nicely together.
They do, and I've got a lovely glass of red wine as I'm talking to you.
Lucky you.
Yeah, and I've got the book to the left of it, and also the DVD. And I'm looking at the book. The book would say to me, the fella that wrote the book is a Liverpool fan because he's got Shanks on top of Busby and Jock Stein.
I had no say in the who was where.
And then I would say the fella that done the documentary was a United fan because he's got Busby, Shankly and Stein.
No, Johnny's not a United fan.
No, I know he's not. I can't believe that you had coffee and not lager with Johnny Owen.
I know. You know what? When I was selling that story, I was thinking, did we have? Because now we'd be straight in the pub, Johnny and I. But
absolutely.
I think it's one of those when I think it might have been even a bit too early for either of us. I think it was sort of late morning situation, and So that was, I think, our first encounter was over coffees, but that wouldn't be the case anymore.
But I've read the book and I've watched the DVD, and I think that they're absolutely fantastic. And you're right, the book, as you're reading from the book, you're watching it, it's almost, and that's what I said, they're just so interwoven. I think.
Yeah, I mean that was serendipity. It wasn't something we didn't sit down and go, right, tell me frame for frame how you're pitching this movie, I didn't think that. I think the two of us were so in love with the three characters that we probably just, without realizing it, just had the same thoughts about them. But and it's hard not to, it's that's what it is. It's a story, and I love how the three lives intertwine. I think people know that they were great men and all, knew each other and stuff, but not so many little incidents and the way their lives intertwined, and they'd meet each other and become very good friends, and the way even Busby suggested to Liverpool that they should have a look at this guy at Huddersfield, and then he said, I think I'm going to regret that, which in a way they did, because Liverpool became Man U's biggest rivals because of it. So it's an amazing an amazing thing. And I didn't know as much as about Jock Stein, and really fell in love with Jock and the way he approached football and what he did at Celtic. I think probably is the most incredible achievement. That 67 team is probably the one for me. I think what they did and the way they beat that absolutely amazing Inter Milan team, took them to pieces, was just so brave and great to see, you know.
Absolutely. It was the El Grande Inter Milan side as well. With Sandro Mazzola, whose father was the great Valentino Mazzola, who was the captain of El Grande Torino.
There you go. Yes, yeah, great names as well.
Oh, absolutely. but those three men, again, when football, and we look at football through the time, and these days it's all Premier League.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Premier League, and Ferguson obviously gets a good shout because in the 90s what Manchester United did, but these men largely have been, I think, largely ignored by the modern media, and I think it's such a shame, and it's fantastic to have a book and a DVD that really puts these as the three kings, because they all built football clubs, and that was the reason that Busby went to Manchester United, because he was captain of Liverpool in his day and Manchester City, but at Manchester United he was given a blank piece of paper or canvas to create a football club, not a team. Bill Shankly, the boot room was already there. Bill just breathed life into it and added the magic to the boot room, and as you say, 67, the Lisbon Lions, arguably the greatest feat by any team, because that year in 67, Celtic Football Club took on everybody and conquered it, and we all love Jinky Johnson, an absolute legend.
And they were basically a team of locals. You know, there was all from the area, which is just, will never happen again in any team, I don't think. To have a group of players who are all from the same, all born in a 10-mile radius of the ground. I mean, it's incredible.
Apart from Bobby Lennox, he was an Ayrshire.
Yeah, that's true.
He was a foreigner. Jim McCalliog told me that he was a foreigner, Gab. He's an Ayrshire man. But you're right. How would that ever happen again? But Jock did it, and again, in an age where you had to win your league to be able to compete in the European Cup, not like now you come fourth and you can get in the Champions League. But the Champions League isn't the League of Champions. It's all bonkers, isn't it?
Well, the subtitle to the book is "The Makers of Modern Football," so
absolutely
that was very important, I think, to me to get that across, because you can't blame anyone. People do forget, and time moves on.
Of course they do.
People probably think, young people will think that these, Celtic, Liverpool, Manchester United were always big, which is totally the opposite. I think I'm a bit biased as a Liverpool fan, but I think what Shankly did at Liverpool is slightly overlooked because what he built stayed built, if you know what I mean. I think if Brian Clough, it's an amazing feat, and it is rightly lauded as one of the great things that have happened to British football, what he did at Forest. Yeah. But he didn't build it to stay built. It's a burning comet in the sky, isn't it? It disappears. What
a
Shankly
small
did
club
was but Liverpool was a second division side, the same as Forest when
yes, they were.
Clough took off, and they were really struggling and poor. They're in a city. That's different. They've got a city. They've got a city behind them. A city, albeit the two clubs there, but still, Nottingham Forest is more provincial. I do understand that. Yeah. But what Shankly did was get rid of any ego and say to himself. Usually, he could have brought in new staff, people that knew him and listened to him, but he saw in these quiet men who were already there, Paisley, Fagan, Tom Bennett, people like that. That actually this is a beautiful well of information and football knowledge. So why get rid of it? So the whole thing married together: lack of ego, hard work, lots of football knowledge. And the fairy on top of that tree is Shankly's personality, and the whole thing just becomes a sort of an oasis, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Of football, and then the rest is history. And they all go on to be these clubs that are global now. I mean, they probably all sort of slightly mistrusted the world as three men of a certain generation, but what they've built, whether they like it or not, is just global. Juggernauts.
I hate the word brand, but you're right. No, you were going to. I know, but they are what when you look at Liverpool Football Club, Manchester United Football Club, Celtic. I mean, Rangers. I think are a massive club as well.
Yeah, massive.
And for me, them are the four biggest British football clubs.
Yeah.
But you are absolutely spot on. Manchester United wasn't that juggernaut before Busby.
They didn't have a ground. They
absolutely
been bombed by the Luftwaffe, and they had to play at Main Road. We're not talking about someone who's just going. I'm going to the easy job. It was far from an easy job. He was offered the coaching job at Liverpool, but he wanted to be the main man. He wanted to be a manager. I think the war had changed so many people's lives, and their playing days had been cut short. So these Shankly and Busby especially really just focused on being managers. I think was what they were born to be.
Absolutely. In Liverpool, I remember my dad saying, I remember when Brummagem beat Liverpool 9-1 nip and Billy Liddell scored the Liverpool goal. And before Shanks, there wasn't that Liverpool. But Bill Shankly, for me, growing up in the 70s, there was two managers that I used to look at Match of the Day, love them. And that's why I've always been a lover of anything that Cloughie done. And Bill Shankly in Liverpool. And as a 70s kid, I guess the 80s kids, probably more Manchester United than Liverpool. But for me, growing up in the 70s, it was always Liverpool, the cop, you'll never walk alone. I've never been a Liverpool fan because I wasn't born in Liverpool. I was brought up in Birmingham. And I think my dad would have drowned me if I wasn't a Birmingham City supporter. But now I look at football in a completely different way. But I've always loved it. Shanks, I mean, when he first took the job, they said, what do you want off the top, Bill? And he said, Everton, son. But that was he was just witty, he was gritty.
Well, TV, we've talked about Match today a lot, and TV was coming out, and these two guys were just made for the camera. They wanted to be in front of the camera, and it wasn't really seen before. Even Sir Matt, there was just incredibly knowledge of football, and would do things like Parkinson. We'd go on there a bit, but wasn't that? So he didn't court it so much. He was of the old school, wasn't he? And I think I just felt that Shankly and then Clough was probably quite influenced by Shankly. I think he liked the bravado and Shanks loved his American gangster movies and James Cagney films, and he saw him and he used to wear like really polished shoes and with steel caps on the soles, so you could actually hear him coming down the corridor. Apparently you knew Shanks was coming, all that kind of like, here I am, look at me, which worked for the new TV age, so.
But didn't he, Klopp to a degree.
Yeah.
I look at lots of things on social media, and a few people have blocked me for my opinions, etc. Especially with Bielsa, there's never been a connection with fans and a football club. Did you not see Bill Shankly?
Exactly.
Shankly, for me, was the greatest manager that had Liverpudlians just waiting on his bated breath. Yeah. In fact, when Shankly retired, and they'd done a Vox Pops, and again, having a laugh.
Yeah, no one believed it.
No, he's not. You're having us on. No, because Shankly was Liverpool, and sadly, when he did retire, he kept going to the training ground, and they had to turn him away, didn't they?
Yeah, it wasn't ideal. You can understand. One, Shanks lived nearby. He built Melwood to be what it was, and that was his life: getting up in the morning, getting fresh air, and seeing the boys. And I remember interviewing Tommy Smith years ago about it, and it was very awkward for the players. And of course, what else? You don't start calling him Bill. He's always going to be boss.
Yeah,
he's always going to be boss. And Bob, who was such a quiet, unassuming man, probably wouldn't have said anything, but it got around that it was a bit of a problem. And I think that Peter Robinson, who recently sadly died, he was a great chief executive. I think he had to step in as well and just say, look, Bill, you can't keep coming, which it's terrible, really, because then he did lose, his legacy. His legacy wasn't affected because look, he's revered now. I go to games and you see 14-year-old lads singing songs about Shankly, so it's there. That's never gone. But whilst he was alive, his last years were affected by it, and I think even like Joe Fagan once commented that he thought he died from a broken heart because he'd gone out too early, and he wasn't happy with the way. Maybe he felt like he was undervalued there after all he'd done, which is a real shame. I mean, it's if only he knew just how much he was loved now,
Absolutely.
All this time later.
Yeah, he was loved then. He's loved now. I mean, he's got the Shankly gates. You've got the spirit of Shankly. Whenever I hear Liverpool Football Club, the first person that I always think about is Shanks. Never even called him Shankly. It was Shanks, and he got that tracksuit top on. He'd always wear that tracksuit top. He'd be on Match of the Day, and it was just everything that you'd want from a football manager.
Well, things like going around the pitch when they'd won the league.
Absolutely.
In 73, and a fan threw his scarf on for him, and a policeman kicked it away. And Shanks
wrote that in a poem.
That's someone's life. I mean, and it will never be the same, but you can see the way Klopp goes up and does the fist bump.
Yes.
It's the modern game. But there's a link. There's a link now between manager and player and fan. And I remember Liverpool got a lot of stick for it in Klopp's his first season. They scraped a 2-2 draw at Anfield against Albion, West Bromwich Albion. Last minute equaliser. Divock Origi, I think, got it, funny enough. And everyone was leaving. It was a disappointing 2-2 draw against West Brom, but the fans had stayed, and they got the equaliser, and Klopp led them all to the Kop and did the whole kind of German arm in arm thing. And you could see players like James Milner thinking, "What are we doing here? We've just got a 2-2 with West Brom." Yeah. But it was really, I think Klopp will go on to say that was a vital point because it just created a sudden link between them all, and you trust us, we trust you, and let's all do this together, which you now see at Liverpool, don't you?
I think you're right, and I think there's that common thread, isn't there? It's the love of the common man and the association with football, and they could relate, and they all understood that the fans are so integral and so important. And I think Nottingham Forest with Steve Cooper, he does the fist bumps as well because he's trying to take it back to the years of Brian Clough. And so many managers these days, or owners, Villa, fantastic example of that, try and forget their history because it almost embarrassed the owners that they won things before. But I think you've always got to remember those golden days, them halcyon days, and connect with the football family. And I think that both Klopp and Cooper are modern day managers that have done that. And then, when I heard all that about Leeds and Bielsa, I think, he did okay, and the fans did love him clearly. But come on, I mean, Bill Shankly, I don't think there's a greater exponent of that than Bill.
Well, it was interesting. It's in the book that I think Phil Thompson went to Liverpool to interview Klopp a few years ago for Sky, and went up to his office, and Phil Thompson was taken by all the pictures on Klopp's wall, on his office wall that he'd put up of Shankly and lifting trophies. And they sat down, and Phil had all these questions he wanted to ask Klopp, and Klopp was saying before the camera was rolling, "Tell me about why did he leave, and what was it like working with him, and what were his methods, and what was he really like? Was he like that all the time?" And Thompson was just totally overwhelmed that there was this guy who was from Germany, who was new to the place, who is enamoured by this guy, because I think if you're going to do well at Anfield as a manager, you have to embrace it all. You couldn't. It's just too much in. It's the cement in the walls now, isn't it? Shankly's time there. It's what keeps the whole place ticking.
Yeah, I mean, he literally built the foundations of Liverpool Football Club. He's the godfather of Liverpool. So why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah, exactly. Which all three men are. You know, I think Busby's presence was always there. Whatever Fergie did, Busby was on his shoulder. You know, and I think, and the same as with, you know, the same as Jock Stein is there at Parkhead every home game, isn't it? It's sort of that feeling of. And the Lisbon Lions and all they achieved, and that era will never disappear. And you have to embrace it. You can't be threatened by it as a new manager, thinking, well, that's too much pressure on our shoulders. You have to be able to embrace it, otherwise you're going to go nowhere.
Terry Curran always has a great phrase: some managers fear, but great managers don't fear it. And you look at Klopp, you look at Cooper, they don't fear. They want to embrace the past and bring those great times back. And I think that is confidence. And I think when you have that confidence, when you have that personality, I think all the stars align and you're ready for greatness. And I don't think it's any coincidence that Liverpool have brought back the glory years, because Jurgen has adopted the Shankly philosophy, and hopefully Steve Cooper will bring the glory years back to Nottingham Forest, because he's done exactly the same with Brian Clough. You know, I don't think it's coincidence. Going back to thou shalt not pass, who were your favourite centre-halves? Because you did reference Ron Yates. I mean, he's a colossus. Shankly, he used to say, didn't he? You know?
Yeah. He's one of my favourites without seeing them. You know, I never saw Ron play, unfortunately. But I mean, with my Liverpool hat on, it would be. I grew up with. I was always fascinated by how Alan Hansen could play, because it was a little bit different. It was in the 80s. Was still a lot of, you know, the rules meant that the centre half could be quite, for want of a better word, dirty. And it was still that Terry Butcher, blood on the shirt sort of position. Do you know what I mean? Alan Hansen just seemed to, again, a midfielder turned into a centre half, which sort of makes it. Alan just seemed to play the game at a pace that he wanted to play at. Centre forwards couldn't. Centre forwards went to bully him, actually, and it became a thing. Like you can get at Hansen, but I interviewed Mark Lawrenson, his great partner for the book, and he was saying that actually Alan was very brave and harder than he sort of made out. Because you never saw Alan Hansen. I don't think you ever saw Alan Hansen with mud on his kit, let alone any blood anywhere. Do you know what I mean? So that did interest me. I think Tony Adams is an absolutely exceptional footballer, and a great story about how that young captain at Arsenal, but really the booing and the abuse he took about the donkey and stuff and everything.
Yes.
I know he was quite put out about it, and he knew he was just as good a footballer as the likes of Hansen, but he was. I'm not having a go here at George Graham, but his tactics were to get centre halves weren't there to start attacks; they were there to defend, which is absolutely fine. So he learnt his craft that way. But it took some extensive coaching with Terry Venables at England, and then of course Arsene Wenger to see the real Tony Adams and just how good he was. So I like that sort of the journey, for want of a better word, that he went on. And I mean, the master of it all was Franco Baresi for me, because he was not huge, not big, but he could leap. He had a great win headers, but the way he wasn't aesthetically pleasing just for the sake of it. He was actually quite a no-nonsense defender, Franco Baresi. That was his first thought, was tackle, block, get out. But he did it. He just timed things so beautiful. It was like watching a surgeon at work. You know, just cut in, have it, and give it to Maldini at fullback, or give it to Donadoni at right. He just picked out a quick, very simple pass, so effective. And I love finding as much clips as I can on YouTube of players like Franco Baresi, because they really do make the position that mixture of quite nastiness, because you've got to be nasty to stop goals, and starting stuff as well. So you know, they're the obvious ones for me that stand out.
There's absolute beauty and art in the
Yeah.
art of defending.
Well, funnily enough, I mentioned that the book was in my mind for a long time, and it was actually watching a game in the Champions League. Tottenham were at home to Juventus and went 1-0 up. It was a few years back. And then Juventus equalised, and then maybe the score went 2-1 up. I can't remember. Anyway, Tottenham needed to score, and they had about 20 minutes to do so. And it was, and you know, being Italians, it was they were treated deep, and my God, did they defend well. And Chiellini was at centre half with his wonderfully broken Italian nose, that Roman nose, and he was blocked. I mean, he was up against Kane and Son and that mob, and he was just putting his face in. And it thought, God, defenders are still doing that. They're still, as much as the game's changed, you've still got this breed of defender who will do anything to stop a goal. And I remember one tackle he did at the end, right in the 6-yard box, and Buffon just leapt on him like he'd scored an overhead kick from 20 yards, you know. So, and that made me think, right, that this book has to be written, because this is still a position that, for all its changes and what coaches are asking these guys to do, still fundamentally must stick their head right where it hurts.
How did you get that name, Thou Shalt Not Pass? Because I think that absolutely nails down what a defender is, and especially with the Catenaccio and the Italians. And I think the defender for Tottenham that night was Sanchez, the Colombian, wasn't he? He was absolutely awful. And again, he's not one that thou shalt not pass, because most people do pass him.
Yeah, well, the title came from a great interview I did very early on. It's when you write a book, you're pitching it first. So I just had to write a sample chapter as part of my pitch. And the first interview I did for it was with the wonderful Terry Butcher.
Yeah, what a lovely man, isn't he?
Yeah, fantastic. And we got talking, and I think Terry will never admit it, but I think I also almost made him cry. He was very emotional about the days. I said, can I take you to a fictitious game? Just close your eyes and think that you're 1-0 up at Old Trafford playing for Ipswich, and there's 10 minutes left, and 55,000 United fans are baying for blood and want an equaliser. And he was just like, oh, those were the days that I lived for. That's what we played. Russell Osman, me, Mick Mills, George Burley, and Paul Cooper in goal. My mind's gone blank.
It would have been Paul Cooper in goal, yeah.
Great keep. He just was like, right, we're together now. And Terry's war cry was, "Thou shalt not pass."
Yes.
I think the old I think it's "Thou shalt," but Terry shouted "Thou shall," which I like better because it was just his way of saying it. So that stuck in my head straight away, and I had my working title, which was very much agreed upon that it should be the actual title. So "Thou shalt not pass" is a war cry of Terry Butcher's.
I went to a gentleman's evening. There was all gentlemen there, of course. It was an after dinner speak in a bar that I frequent in Wollaston, and Terry was the guest that night.
Oh, how wonderful!
And I had the pleasure, because I go there quite often. I sit down with Andy Blair and have something to eat, and I was sitting having my tea with Terry Butcher as well. And what come across with Terry Butcher? What a lovely, lovely man. You would never put him as a centre half. You wouldn't. He was just too nice, but on the pitch, he was a bloody animal. It was so hard.
Great footballer, great passer of the ball. Really could pick out a ball. Really great. Great partnership with Russell Osman.
Left foot as well. Do you know how he developed that left foot?
He used to ping the ball against the wall, didn't he, at Portman Road?
But what happened earlier... He was when he was a babby. He'd seen as we used to in the olden days, put the tea cozies on the tea, and what he'd done as a babby, he pulled it off and scalded his right foot.
Yes.
And that's how we developed being a left-footed defender. It is incredible.
Life's destinies. Yeah. Incredible. No, what a footballer. One of England's great centre halves. I think he might get in an all-time England team next to Bobby Moore. That would be some partnership.
I think if you want a "thou shalt not pass" defender, then in my lifetime, Terry gets in there, because I think there was two in my lifetime. Terry and Tony, and I would just edge towards Butch. I just thought Butcher was a slightly better player. But again, it's all opinions. The centre half that I would put him by, I was slightly too young to remember Bobby, because Bobby he'd moved, he played against my team in '75 when he moved to Fulham. But the player growing up that I just had so much respect for as a defender was Jockey. I thought Alan Hansen was the most cultured, composed centre half that I've ever seen play football. I've never really looked at the centre half position before as being an art, but Jockey made being centre half an absolute art form. Thought he was just different gravy.
Well, the great thing about you could say about him is imagine how good he'd be in the modern era when it's less physical and the pitches. I mean, he'd glide out on mud that they just, I don't know. I mean, a lot of these guys, how they made the ball seem to stick to their feet, even though they were playing in sort of trenches. So imagine what they would do today. It's just incredible.
Yeah, he was. And I went to one with Peter Beardsley, and then Jockey got a sense of humour as well. He said to Beardo, after he'd been at Liverpool a while, "You don't get much for £2 million these days, do you?"
Exactly.
So they had a sense of humour as well as being fantastic football players. What's your next venture, Leo? What else are you working on now?
I'm just currently, you caught me doing some non-football stuff because pay the bills. So I'm doing I'm spending my life at the moment writing, this will shock you, but I'm writing about serial killers. So I guess it's a bit like centre halves.
Who's your favourite serial killer?
I'm very biased towards the British, so it's got to be Fred and Rose, isn't it? No, I mean, I actually shouldn't joke about it. I mean, I know it is very silly, I'm slightly involved in doing a lot of research, and it's not pleasant. So what can you do? But I don't know. What makes
a serial killer? We've had this conversation before, but I mean, they're different gravy to normal murderers, aren't they? They just, they're the. I mean, we shouldn't really make light out of people being murdered, but they are the creme de creme of the murderers, aren't they? Because they plan everything to the fine minutiae.
It's quite interesting looking at the character personality traits because they're often quite a high IQ.
Yes.
But I guess it's perfect storm of lots of childhood and parenting issues that they had, whether they were overly parented or ignored,
but there's something in the psyche that makes them go for a particular sort, because that's why they are serial killers. They just go for something.
Well, I'm afraid to say it's often a sort of a sexual thing going on, because they get off on it once, they keep doing it. So it's not like a crime where I've just murdered someone and I've got to hide that and I won't do it again. But unfortunately, it goes deeper and they get thrills out of it that mean they have to do it again. I know it's not one of the serial killers I'm writing about was a football fan, so maybe they just need to take out their aggression on a Saturday or Sunday or Tuesday, whenever the game is. But not one of them had football credentials.
Who thought that when we started about an hour ago with that short pass, we would end up talking about serial killers? And that's what I love, the randomness of talking to people, without any script. We just talk off the cuff, play as the Mavericks used to play in the good old days. Is there any book that you've written from your library that you go, do you know what, that was the greatest thing that I've ever written? And I'm guessing that the next one will be that, because that's what great writers always say.
I don't know. I'm always. My heart says the centre half, but because it's something I was so interested in and sort of had visions of the book and everything from the cover, the design of the cover. Bloomsbury published it and they did a fantastic job, and the cover I love, and I look at it and I have a real sense of pride. But I think because of the subject matters and how much I grew to adore the subjects, it's the Three Kings and Shankly, Busby and Steen. I just think it's probably the best thing I've written thus far.
And you can purchase, guys, any of Leo's books on the usual outlets. My usual outlet is Amazon. Because I go Amazon, I go books, and I go Leo Moynihan. Right, thou shalt not pass Three Kings.
If you can support your local bookshop, you can often go into a bookshop and order stuff. So whilst
you can.
Whilst I get the immediacy and very how much Amazon is necessary in all our lives, keep local bookshops going if you can.
I think that's an absolutely fantastic point to finish on, Leo, because we do sometimes forget about that. And me,
they're really important. They're really important.
I'm very guilty of that because I look at football books and I must spend about £1,000 a year on football books. I don't necessarily read them all, but I think, I want to do a podcast about that. And I get the person that wrote the book to talk about it. I don't need to know nothing about it.
I don't want to act as your accountant, but I hope you're writing off that £1,000.
Well, I don't, because it's just my hobby. I do all of this for free because I love football. And one day, if somebody thought that I was half decent at it, then I might get paid, and then I could say to my accountant, and I have to say I'm going to dedicate this podcast to my accountant, as you brought it up, because he sadly passed away. And I've been a customer of his I'm 57 now. As a young boy, I walked into his office, God bless him, Martin, and he looked after me, got me my first mortgage, he sorted me out, and I was devastated. So you're absolutely right. But one of these days, if my dream does come true, I might be able to say to the new brand of accountant, there's my accounts, go and sort it out and write that off of the tax man. There are my football books, £1,000 a year.
I'll certainly be singing your praises to anyone who is hiring football people, because you're clearly very passionate about it and good to talk to.
I absolutely love it. I've absolutely loved this hour. Can I thank you so much, Leo, for your time. And anything you need, just give us a shout. We'll do another podcast.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Absolutely loving your work, mate. Cheers.
All right.
Thanks, pal.
Cheers, Paul.
Cheers now, and thanks for listening, guys. Ta-ra. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
If you want years of better sleep, then you have to upgrade your bedding during Boll & Branch's annual summer event. Right now, you can get Boll & Branch's best-selling, naturally cooling sheets with their best offer of the season. Feel the difference night after night of light and breathable sheets made with the highest quality materials. Shop the Boll & Branch annual summer event now for 20% off site-wide. Plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com with code BUTTERY. Limited time only. Exclusions apply. See site for details.